This year, our garden has more flowers in it than ever before. So we're mid-August now. I'm going to show you everything that's in flower in the garden, and we'll try and keep tally of how many different plants are flowering in such a small garden here in the UK. So we're going to start this video in our Paradise Patio project, which is a small space where most of the plants are growing in pots. This area in particular is a display made entirely out of plants growing in pots, and you can see how lush and green it looks. And this is something that you can replicate if you've got a small courtyard garden or a balcony. If you don't have access to open ground, you can still grow a lush tropical garden. But this area in particular is looking really, really good for flowers at this time of year. So we'll start with this. This is Trachelospermum jasminoides. Now this is a really good, tough, evergreen climber. It's completely hardy in the UK, and all summer, all the way through to the first frosts, it produces masses of these white star-shaped flowers, which earns it the common name of the star jasmine. This is such a fragrant climber. That's why we've got it growing by our back door here. So when we open the back door on a warm day, all of this fragrance just wafts through the downstairs of the house. And it just fills this entire outside area with a really heady scent. And it's really important, I think, to remember to add scent to your garden, and that's where flowers can come in. Now, there are really great plants for scent from foliage. My wife grows some herbs here. We've got rosemary, lavender, thyme. That adds to it as well, but this video is about flowers, so I'll try and stay on topic. Now, this one is evergreen, and the leaves turn red in winter, which adds an extra kind of dimension of interest, but we absolutely love this. And this, talking of plants that grow in pots, has been in a pot for probably about 5 years now, and we just train it up this obelisk, which is a budget obelisk. It's actually made out of 4 candle canes tied together with twine at the top, but it does the trick. Then behind that, we've got some Abutilons in pots here. Now these are in pots because I use these as stock plants for cuttings in the Grow Paradise Nursery. And last year I built quite a collection of Abutilons, but unfortunately lost a few through winter, but these were kept at a minimum temperature of 5 degrees Celsius in our greenhouse. Then one of them is very desirable, and the other probably less so, but it's looking really good this year. This one is Abutilon Pink Charm, and it's a bit like Abutilon Megabotanicum, but it's got these dusky pink flowers. I'm growing it kind of perched on the side here and letting it hang over naturally, but you can also train it up against a wall, and all these flowers will just gracefully hang down. The other one I've got, which typically when I'm doing a video about flowers only has one flower that's going over, is Abutilon Red Tiger. Now this is a really, really nice and highly desirable Abutilon. Again, growing in a pot because I use it for cuttings. You might remember in the winter when I was doing a tour of the greenhouse and all the plants were packed in to keep them protected from the cold. I snapped a couple of the branches off when I was moving around in the tight space. They have rooted and they are growing as plants, and they will be available on the online shop soon. But this is nice because it has yellow flowers with kind of intense red veins going down it, and you can see how many buds there are on this. Now, all the books tell you that Abutilons will grow in shade, and they will, but they have a tendency to grow leggy anyway, so in shade that's just going to increase. But I found that they actually grow so much happier with full sun pretty much most of the day. This area, our garden is almost south-facing, so they bask in sunlight, and it's looking so much happier and healthier now. They just need good drainage to keep them flowering. Then behind that is our roses. Now, I've mentioned when we started this patio project that my wife had to fight her corner to keep the roses, but I'm so glad that she did, because they were one of the first plants to flower in the garden. They just thrive in our clay soil. And we've got some growing in pots this year that I've been feeding regularly, and they're just flowering more this year than ever before. Now, I can't remember the name of them, so I'll have to look them up and put it on screen. But my wife always selects roses that are heavily scented. And again, it's adding to that joy of sitting in this area on a warm day, because all of these plants are releasing their fragrance, and it's just making the patio area smell really, really good. This one is a climbing rose, so at some point we'd love to plant it into the ground and have it growing over an arch, but we don't have the space at the moment. So we're just growing it in a pot, keeping it nice and healthy, and it's repeat flowering. It's been flowering over and over again throughout the summer. There's another rose just here with kind of peachy white flowers. Doesn't flower as much, it's more of a traditional rose, but a very, very heavy scent on that one. And then our climbing rose on the wall. which is just pushing out its final flush of flowers now. That one is Rosa Aloha. We did have it growing in a pot out the front, but that needs quite a bit more sun. That's planted out and it's thriving in the clay soil. Now behind me here is a Brugmansia. I love growing Brugmansias. They have some of the most tropical looking flowers that you can grow in a UK tropical garden. They're tender, so they need protection from cold. This one is Brugmansia cross-cubensis and a cultivar called Charles Grimaldi. Now I'm growing this one for the first time this year because I googled which Brugmansia is kind of the most floriferous, flowers the most through the year and the most reliable, because when you put so much effort into growing a plant, you don't want it to just put out leaves and no flowers, especially when you're growing it for things like this. And I grew these from cuttings at the start of the year and it's doing really well. This very, very heavily scented flower is the first of many because there are enormous buds on their way. So we're going to be enjoying even more fragrance in this area. So let's move on to another Abutilon here. This one is Abutilon Aphrodite with these bright pink flowers. This was a purchase from a plant fair in spring. I really do like Abutilons. They've just got so much flower power. They're really easy to grow and they will survive down to -5, provided they've got good drainage. I think the reason I lost a lot of my plants last winter was they just sat too wet and rotted off. Then in this bed here, I've shown you when we've done an update of the Paradise patio project in recent videos. We've got Geranium Roseanne. This flowers from spring through to the first frosts. Pollinators love it. We've got bees on it all the time. And it's just a mass of flowers. Now it has got a bit big this year. It's covering most of this bed. We were discussing whether we're going to shrink it, split it, maybe spread it around a bit. We'll see. But this year it's really filled out the bed and it's provided a lot of colour and a lot of feed for pollinating insects, which is really important to us. We've got Impatiens tuberosa here, which is a Madagascan plant, but it thrives in British summers planted outside, especially now that we're getting a bit of heat in August with the bright pink flowers. We've got a fuchsia that I've mentioned before we got from Hampton Court Flower Show. I can't remember the cultivar name on this, but it's really nice and completely hardy, so it comes back every year. You can see how this trio of plants has just filled out this space really nicely. Now back here is our Justia carnea, which is another pink flowering plant. It's just starting to produce full flowers now. The buds are there, but I reckon it'll be another week or so. So we'll do another update video when this one's in flower because it really is spectacular. They grow it in Kew inside of the Prince of Wales Conservatory, but you can grow it outside in the warm summer months and it does really, really well in the UK. As long as the temperatures are kind of above 15 degrees Celsius, it will grow and it will flower very reliably, at least for me here. And the flowers look very, very tropical. And then down at the lower level, we've got Tibouchina aviliana, which has the common name of the glory bush. Now this will grow as like a woody shrub covered in these giant purple flowers. Here I'm growing it in a pot because it's tender, it needs winter care, and it's so much easier to grow plants in pots that you're going to need to protect through winter rather than having to dig them up every autumn and move them into the greenhouse before it gets cold. Just grab the pot, check it for slugs and snails, and then move it into the greenhouse or conservatory or whatever space you use to overwinter your plants. But look at the purple on that. Now I'm thinking it might be a bit too similar to the geranium. I thought they'd combine nicely and they do match, but the similarity means that we're losing the impact of the Tibouchina, so I might move it over to a different part of the garden just to bring this purple out to other areas of this patio project to make the whole space feel more cohesive. But it's a stunning flower, that one. Now, before we move on to this bed completely, I realised I just forgot the sunflowers, and who can forget the sunflower? It's something that we've probably all grown from seed. From when we were young, we liked to grow sunflowers in my family and compete for height. We've been growing these, my wife and I, since we got our first place, which was a flat that just had a small decking outside the front door where we grew them in pots. So it's probably some of the first plants we grew together. So it's nice to be able to grow them again here. And I think each year we're going to try and grow different types. We really like the dwarf ones that are multi-headed, which this was supposed to be, but they've grown surprisingly large. But again, it's a great plant for a splash of colour, and they pull in pollinating insects. The bees love them. And now we've got the sunflower seeds forming, so we're going to keep the heads for the birds to enjoy as well, where they can pick all the sunflower seeds out. Right, let's move over to our potted display in this area here. Now, all of this is growing in pots. We've got more Brugmansia at the back that are just budding up. So this will be covered in those huge trumpet flowers as well. I reckon the next couple of weeks, and we'll be enjoying that. And these are both scented varieties. So again, it's going to add to the aroma on the patio area. In here, I've got a couple more Abutilons. I've got an orange flowering one. This is Abutilon Apfelsine. It's just a huge open cup shape. They're related to Hibiscus, so they really do have that tropical look. And then a red flowering one, which is Abutilon Lily. Now, I mentioned earlier that Abutilons have a tendency to get tall and leggy, but here that's working in their favour because they're up above all this dense foliage down at the lower levels, and they're providing just non-stop flowers all summer long. Then down at those lower levels, we have a couple of other plants in flower. Now, underneath this really nice Begonia luxurians, we've got Cuphea ignea, or the Mexican cigar plant. This is a great plant for underplanting larger shrubs in your garden. Again, this is growing in a pot. It's really easy to grow from seed. And it flowers non-stop, much like the Abutilons, with these tiny orange flowers with what looks like a burnt end, hence the name, the cigar flower. And it just slowly spreads around. I've got one in the ground on the other side. I actually think the one in the pot's doing better, which tells me they like good drainage. Then next to that, which is just going over really now, is the flowers of Phytolacca laccaboom, which I think is a great name. I love it when plant breeders have a sense of humour. Now these form these great big pink flower spikes that are followed by dark berries. The birds love them, but the berries are full of seeds. So you can grow this plant as a fast growing annual year on year if you just save the seeds from the berries. And in a future video, I'm actually going to show you my process of saving seeds so that you can all do that in your gardens as well. It's really great when you grow plants, you save the seeds, and you can just keep the cycle going, and it just keeps you on budget. It means you don't have to keep spending money every year. And I think that's everything that's in flower in this bed at the moment. The Salvia convertiflora, which is the Brazilian sword salvia, will send up red spikes in the next probably 3 weeks. This is quite a late flowering one, but it's not there yet. And this Canna tropicana black will flower with red flowers probably at the same time. So these two will pair well, which will look great with this red Abutilon behind it. So as I say, this bed was newly planted this spring and it's filled out really, really nicely. The wind's picked up a little bit, so if there's wind noise on the microphone, I apologise. But in this bed, we've got a mix of foliage and flowers, and it is mostly foliage this year as plants settle in. Not to say that that foliage is bad foliage. This Brasseopsis mitis is looking phenomenal. Look at the size of that leaf. But stay on topic, Craig. It's a flowers video. So this is a fuchsia, a tropical fuchsia. Fuchsia thalia is the cultivar name. It's got really nice, almost glossy, velvety green leaves with a purple veined underside, but it's these clusters of glowing orangey pink flowers that look really good, and it flowers in shade. You can see the amount of foliage cover that's over the top here, and it's still flowering, and there's a second cluster starting there, and there's another one over here. So it's a really nice plant to underplant larger plants, and that purple accent on the leaves means it combines with dark leaf foliage really, really nicely. Then underneath this ever increasing in size Geranium madarensi, which in a couple of years will be another plant that's in flower, but it's not going to do it this year, is another one of these Mexican cigar plants. And as I say, this one's planted into the ground and it just seems to be a bit slower. And that will either be because it prefers the drainage of being in a pot over there, or because it's completely shaded out by all of the foliage of everything else and it needs that bit more sun. But it's not performing. We do have masses of these orange flowers. These are tender, or maybe half hardy with good drainage. But as I say, they grow very, very quickly from seeds. So I'll probably save seeds from this, resow them, and then use them as bedding again next year, because I love them. They're really good doers. Then something else that's in flower, which is up high here, just beneath this Musa cheesemanii, is our vine-leaved salvia. Now this is something I got from Krug Farms 2 or 3 years ago, and I love it for its enormous, tactile, hairy leaves. But even though this one's growing in a pot, so it's restricted, it is producing spires of these electric blue flowers. And as with all salvias, they are absolutely loved by pollinating insects. That one's only growing in a pot because I'm yet to decide where I want to plant it out, because it did get very big when I had it growing in the ground before. But look at it. A salvia with leaves that size. You can't go wrong. It got to about 7 foot tall when I had it in the ground, which is why I need to be very careful about where I plant it. That's the only thing when you're growing plants in a small space. Anything that gets big needs to really earn its keep. Right, let me show you what's flowering on the other side of the garden. So on the nursery side of the garden, we've got these IKEA grow units that I showed you when we were turning this part of the garden into a small nursery in January this year. Now, on top of these units in summer, I grow plants for the local market, and we all love flowers, so I've grown a lot of salvias from seed. And one of those salvias is Salvia Summer Jewel Red, this one. It's so easy to grow from seed. You get these scarlet red flowers, which I think look really good in a tropical garden. And as with all salvias, they attract pollinating insects en masse. And by placing them on top of these units here, we are growing them for the nursery, but we get to enjoy them because they pop up and over the back of everything else in the Paradise patio project. So we can see it and we can see all the bees coming and enjoying them. Now, another salvia, this one wasn't grown from seed, we grew this from young plug plants, is Salvia amistad. And if you're a subscriber to the channel, you'll know that I absolutely love purple flowers, purple foliage. I think it just combines with the lush green of a tropical garden really well. And amistad is a real doer. Now this one's restricted in the 9cm pot, but if I planted this out or potted it on, we would enjoy so many of these purple flowers. And again, it's great for bees. They absolutely love them. Now this plant behind me, which is, if I'm 6 foot, it's probably 7 or 8 foot tall, is a giant Impatiens, Impatiens tinctoria from Africa. And it did have a flower on it when I planned this video this morning, but the wind, as I say, is blowing through, so it's dropped off. But I'm pleased to see on closer inspection that we've now got seed pods that have been left behind. So the pollinating insects are loving this one too. Now this one, I'll bring a picture up, has large white flowers with speckled red throats. And it's another plant, being a white coloured plant. So many white plants are night scented because that white will glow by moonlight and pull in moths. So it's a really good evening scented plant, and it flowers and flowers. So although we've lost today's flower, there is another bud coming here. So we're going to get to enjoy this. Now this plant, surprisingly, is completely hardy. It's planted right at the back of the border and it grows up through the border, fills in all the gaps. And at this time of year, to be honest, it gets a little bit leggy and flops forward. So I'll probably chop some of this back and take cuttings for the nursery. But it's a plant I wouldn't be without in my garden. I think it looks great, especially when it's in bloom. Now I showed you that pink Impatiens tuberosa from Madagascar that's growing planted out on the patio project. But we also grow, and have been growing for quite a few years, Impatiens auricoma cross bicordata, which is a hybrid between 2 other species from Madagascar. And this orange flowering one is great, thrives in shade, and it will produce flowers all summer long. It doesn't matter how much shade you give this plant, it just seems to thrive. In fact, when it's in sun, the leaves get a little bit curled up. It continues to flower, continues to grow, but it doesn't look quite as healthy. When it's in shade, the leaves just grow enormous, and it quickly fills out to almost like a miniature shrub, an undershrub, up to about 75 centimeters tall. You don't have to pinch it out. It branches out freely, and it just produces masses of these flowers all the way up the tips of every single stem. It's definitely a great plant to grow. And these are on the nursery at the moment. Most of them are for sale, but we're going to keep one for propagation because they grow easily from cuttings. And I've actually done a video showing you how to do that. So search the channel for that one, and I'll put a link in the description. You can hear a bee buzzing around. Now, down in this narrow border that has featured recently because I've been planting out a lot of hardy begonias here, are most of the begonias in flower. Now, I'll show you the ones that are. I think it is only the begonias in bloom. Yeah. So at the front here is Begonia grandis, subspecies Evansiana, variety Alba. What a short and catchy name. Basically means it's Begonia grandis, subspecies Evansiana, has this lovely red underside to the leaves. Alba means white, so it's got the white flowers just protruding out here. This one has slowly self-propagated itself through the border. It's right down at the front, all the way to the back, and it's forming a really nice, lush, leafy ground cover with that contrasting red underside. White flowers on that one. Now, I do have another Begonia grandis back here. This one is Begonia grandis Heron's Pirouette. And you'll notice this one doesn't have the red undersides, but it has pink flowers that are about to emerge. So you do get different flowering colours, really just white, pink, or whitey pink with the Begonia grandis, but it's nice to have a bit of variety. I've got Begonia grandis bells and whistles as well, which has pink flowers at the moment, soft pink flowers that are actually surprisingly large compared to what these produce, and that one's got the speckled leaves. Then back here we've got Begonia panchartharensis, which is a really large-leaved begonia. Look at the size of that compared to my hand, and it's absolutely producing bright white flowers here. Now, I'd love if these hybridise and crossed, if they can, I don't know, and we could grow some new intergeneric hybrid, but that's another project for another day. And just behind Begonia panchartharensis is Begonia pedata, which has just finished flowering and actually has a seed pod here. So I'm going to have a go at growing some from seed if that matures. Now, down at the base are our hardy begonias, and I think one of them is producing a flower bud. So we might get to enjoy some flowers on that one soon. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit here and show you some of the plants that are flowering on the nursery in the greenhouse as well, because they're flowering and we all love sharing plants, so I'm going to show you them anyway, even if they're not in the nursery. Then I'll show you some plants that are about to flower and I cannot wait to see. Now, first up is this Mandevilla Rio Deep Red. Now, Mandevilla is a really nice climbing plant, sometimes called the Brazilian jasmine, because it has a very similar habit to that woody jasmine that I showed you that pumps the fragrance into the downstairs of our house and around the patio area. Now, these are fragrant, but they're tender, so they need to be grown as a conservatory plant through winter. And they like really good, dry, free-draining soil. Don't overwater them, they hate it. At the start of the year, you might remember I started selling and growing these. Now, this is a new intergeneric hybrid between sempervivums and aeoniums. So this is Semponium. Now, this is one that's continued to grow, put out foliage. You can see the size they get to and the colour. But one of the plugs that was the same size bloomed, and look how bizarre that is. You can see the different parentage here. So obviously the foliage wants to grow like aeonium, but the flowers in clusters like this is very, very similar to how sempervivums flower, rather than sending up that great big flower spike like aeoniums do. Really nice, and that yellow flower contrasts great against those dark leaves. Now let's have a quick look what else might be in flower. Back here, this is Nicotiana. Again, another really good plant. This is clearly one that I forgot to put on. A really good plant for night scent. I think they look good in a tropical garden, and these deep red colours is why I chose this one. Cuba Bright Red. I mean, the name indicates, points you in the direction that it's going to be a plant that's going to look good amongst lush, leafy foliage. And we've actually got an air plant in flower as well at the moment. This is a Tillandsia, which is a type of bromeliad, and this one is a cultivated form called Cotton Candy, and it has this bright pink flower bracts and then small purple flowers that pop out from inside there. And I love growing these mounted onto the branches of larger trees or up the kind of posts of garden structures. They're really nice plants to grow. I think that's all that's flower. Yeah, it's all that's flowering in here at the moment. Let me show you some plants that I'm looking forward to blooming, because they're budding up and they will have some of the largest flowers in the garden. Now, this enormous large-leaved plant is a herbaceous hibiscus, and it's hardy, so it dies back to ground level every single winter, and it will regrow up to 1 metre tall every year. This has taken, I think it was -5, -6 last winter, and it's grown back with ease. And the leaves look really nice. Dark leaves, like I say, look great. They contrast against green leaves in a garden. And it's just budding up now. I can count 6 or 7 flower buds on the tip of each one of these herbaceous stems. Now, I've got 2 types here and 1 available on the nursery. And let me show you how impressive this is going to be. So this is pretty true to flower size. This one is Hibiscus Pink Passion, and I think this is the Pink Passion one. So that pink contrasting against this dark foliage is going to be incredible. A lot of you will be growing this one because I sold them at the start of the year as plug plants, and I'm selling them as young plants now. This is Hibiscus Giant Red. Again, this is the size the flower will actually be. They're about 20 centimeters across. To be able to get that flower on something hardy is incredible. And then I've got another form, which we have lots of available as this size plant on the nursery at the moment. This is Hibiscus Cranberry Crush, again with huge bright red flowers that look really, really tropical. So I cannot wait for this to bloom, and I will be sharing it on our YouTube channel when it does, because it's gonna look absolutely incredible. Hopefully this look around our garden in August when everything's in flower has just shown you that tropical gardens don't need to be barren from flowers. You can grow a lot of flowering plants in amongst that big foliage, and it will elevate it. It will bring it alive with pollinators. You'll get to enjoy the fragrance. I mean, it really adds to a tropical style garden. I would love to see what you're growing, and you can actually share pictures with me over on our growers community at growparadise.social. It's free to join. People are sharing pictures of their gardens, and it's so inspiring to see what everybody else is growing. It's how we can share ideas and inspiration. So sign up over there. If you're already a member, go and post a picture. I'd love to see it. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, if you're in the UK, feel free to check out our plant and seed shop. We ship all over the UK. Thank you so much for watching. Hit subscribe if you found the video useful, and I will see you all in the next one.